Welcome back to the Masked Reader. Tonight you will see the rest of Group 3. Remember to vote for your favorite reader to keep them in the competition.
I would have to say that my favorite subject in school is art. I love finding new ways to be expressive. My favorite picture book as a kid was any of the Dr. Seuss books. I loved his rhymes. And I picked a koala because koalas are my favorite animal, so that one was easy. Even though it's not a Dr. Seuss book, this is one of my favorite books. I Am Enough. Like the sun, I am here to shine. Like the voice, I am here to sing. Like the bird, I'm here to fly and soar high over everything. Like the trees, I'm here to grow. Like the mountains, here to stand. Like time, I'm here to be and be everything I can. Like the champ, I'm here to fight. Like the heart, I'm here to love. Like the ladder, here to climb, and like the air, to rise above. Like the wind, I'm here to push. Like a rope, I'm here to pull. Like the rain, I'm here to pour and drip and fall until I'm full. Like the moon, I'm here to dream. Like the student, here to learn. Like the water, here to swell. Like the fire, here to burn. Like the winner, I'm here to win, and if I don't, get up again. I know that I may sometimes cry, but even then, I'm here to try. I'm not meant to be like you. You're not meant to be like me. Sometimes we will get along, and sometimes we will disagree. I know that we don't look the same. Our skin, our eyes, our hair, our frame. But that does not dictate our worth. We both have places here on earth. And in the end, we are right here to live a life of love, not fear. To help each other when it's tough, and to say together, I am enough. So I hope that you're all remembering that you also are enough. We all have our different purposes here on earth, but we're all equally special. I miss you guys so much, and I hope that I get to see you guys soon. Bye-bye for now.
I would have to say that my favorite school subject is science. I like to experiment and invent new things. My favorite book as a kid was The Bernstein Bears. I loved how the family always shared great adventures. I picked my mystery animal because I find unicorns to be magical and beautiful. What's your favorite book? Good morning, boys and girls. I hope everyone finds themselves healthy and safe. Today's story I'm going to read to you is called Found. Let's begin. One day, Bear found something in the forest. Bear thought it was the most special thing he had ever seen. He gently carried the toy bunny home. This lost bunny seemed sad, thought Bear. He wanted to help find its home. With flyers stacked high, Bear set off. Bear posted flyers on every tree. There were many treasured things that were lost, but not a toy bunny. He searched high and low for its owner. But no one came for the bunny. Bear, time for supper, Mom cried. Bear wished the bunny was his to keep, but the bunny's family must be so worried, thought Bear. Poor lost bunny. The next day, Bear and the bunny swung on a tire, played hide and seek, picked juicy blackberries, and had a picnic. It was a perfect day until Floppy, my bunny, said Moose. Bear screeched to a stop. Bear handed the bunny to Moose. The bunny was finally going home. Floppy, my dear old friend, cried Moose. As a young calf, Moose had loved Floppy very much. Goodbye, Floppy, said Bear. Wait, said Moose. Moose was glad to see Floppy, but special toys are meant to be passed on to someone special. Will you take good care of Floppy for me? Asked Moose. Forever, said Bear. The bunny wasn't lost anymore. Floppy was home, safe and found. The end. I hope you all enjoyed my story, boys and girls. Have a great day. Miss you.
Hey, I'm Mouse. My favorite school subject when I was a kid was social studies because I love learning about history. My favorite picture book was the Arthur the Aardvark series, and I chose to be a mouse in this competition because I think mice are adorable. Hello everyone, Mouse here. Today I'm going to be reading you the book Enemy Pie by Derek Munson, illustrated by Tara Callahan King. It should have been a perfect summer. My dad helped me build a treehouse in our backyard. My sister was at camp for 3 whole weeks, and I was on the best baseball team in town. It should have been a perfect summer, but it wasn't. It was all good until Jeremy Ross moved into the neighborhood right next door to my best friend Stanley. I did not like Jeremy Ross. He laughed at me when he struck me out in a baseball game. He had a party on his trampoline, and I wasn't even invited, but my best friend Stanley was. Jeremy Ross was the one and only person on my enemy list. I never even had an enemy list until he moved into the neighborhood. But as soon as he came along, I needed one. I hung it up in my treehouse where Jeremy Ross was not allowed to go. Dad understood stuff like enemies. He told me that when he was my age, he had enemies too, but he knew of a way to get rid of them. I asked him to tell me how. Tell you how? I'll show you how, he said. He pulled a really old recipe book off the kitchen shelf. Inside, there was a worn out scrap of paper with faded writing. Dad held it up and squinted at it. Enemy pie, he said. You may be wondering what exactly is in enemy pie. I was wondering too. But Dad said the recipe was so secret, he couldn't even tell me. I decided it must be magic. I begged him to tell me something, anything. I will tell you this, he said. Enemy pie is the fastest known way to get rid of enemies. Now, of course, this got my mind working. What kinds of things, disgusting things, would I put into a pie for an enemy? I brought Dad some weeds from the garden, but he just shook his head. I brought him earthworms and rocks, but he didn't think he'd need those. I gave him the gum I'd been chewing on all morning, and he gave it right back to me. I went out to play alone. I shot baskets until the ball got stuck in the roof. I threw a boomerang that never came back to me, and all the while I listened to the sounds of my dad chopping and stirring and blending the ingredients of enemy pie. This could be a great summer after all. Enemy pie was going to be awful. I tried to imagine how horrible it must smell, or worse yet, what it would look like. But when I was in the backyard looking for ladybugs, I smelled something really, really, really good. And as far as I could tell, it was coming from our kitchen. I was a bit confused. I went in to ask Dad what was wrong. Enemy pie shouldn't smell this good. But Dad was smart. If enemy pie smelled bad, your enemy would never eat it, he said. I could tell he'd made enemy pie before. The buzzer rang, and Dad put on the oven mitts and pulled the pie out of the oven. It looked like plain old pie. It looked good enough to eat. I was starting to catch on. But still, I wasn't really sure how this enemy pie worked. What exactly did it do to enemies? Maybe it made their hair fall out, or their breath stinky. Maybe it made bullies cry. I asked Dad, but he was no help. He wouldn't tell me a thing. But while the pie cooled, he filled me in on my job. He talked quietly. There is one part of enemy pie that I can't do. In order for it to work, you need to spend a day with your enemy. Even worse, you have to be nice to him. It's not easy, but that's the only way that enemy pie can work. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Of course I was. It sounded horrible. It was scary, but it was worth a try. All I had to do was spend one day with Jeremy Ross, then he'd be out of my hair for the rest of my life. I rode my bike to his house and knocked on the door. When Jeremy opened the door, he seemed surprised. He stood on the other side of the screen door and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was nervous. Can you play? I asked. He looked confused. I'll go ask my mom, he said. He came back with his shoes in his hands. His mom walked around the corner to say hello. You boys stay out of trouble, she said, smiling. We rode bikes for a while and played on the trampoline. Then we made some water balloons and threw them at the neighbor girls. But we missed. Jeremy's mom made us lunch. And after lunch, we went over my house. It was strange, but I was kind of having fun with my enemy. He almost seemed nice. But of course, I couldn't tell Dad that, since he had worked so hard to make this enemy pie. Jeremy Ross liked my basketball hoop. He said he wished he had a basketball hoop, but they didn't have room for one. So I let him win a game, just to be nice. Jeremy Ross knew how to throw a boomerang. He threw it, and it came right back to him. I threw it, and it went over my house and into the backyard. When we climbed over the fence to find it, the first thing Jeremy noticed was my treehouse. My treehouse was my treehouse. I was the boss. If my sister wanted in, I didn't have to let her. If my dad wanted in, I didn't have to let him. And if Jeremy wanted in, "Can we go in it?" he asked. I knew he was going to ask me that. But he was the top person, the only person on my enemy list. And enemies aren't allowed in my treehouse. But he did teach me to throw a boomerang. And he did have me over for lunch. And he did let me play in his trampoline. He wasn't being a very good enemy. "All right," I said, "but hold on." I climbed up ahead of him and tore the enemy list off the wall. I had a checkerboard and some cards in the treehouse. And we played games until my dad called us down for dinner. We pretended we didn't hear him. And when he came out to get us, we tried to hide from him. But somehow, he found us. Dad made us macaroni and cheese for dinner. My favorite. It was Jeremy's favorite too. Maybe Jeremy Ross wasn't so bad after all. I was beginning to think that maybe we should just forget about enemy pie. But sure enough, after dinner, Dad brought out the pie. I watched as he cut the pie into 8 thick slices. "Dad," I said, "it sure is nice having a new friend in the neighborhood." I was trying to get his attention and trying to tell him that Jeremy Ross was no longer my enemy. But Dad only smiled and nodded. I think he thought I was just pretending. Dad dished up 3 plates side by side with big pieces of pie and giant scoops of ice cream. He passed one to me and one to Jeremy. "Wow," Jeremy said, looking at the pie. "My dad never makes pies like this." It was at this point that I panicked. I didn't want Jeremy to eat enemy pie. He was my friend. I couldn't let him eat that. "Jeremy, don't eat it. It's bad pie. I think it's poisonous or something." Jeremy's fork stopped before reaching his mouth. He crumpled his eyebrows and looked at me funny. Oh, I felt relieved. I had saved his life. Whew, I was a hero. "If it's so bad," Jeremy asked, "then why has your dad already eaten half of it?" I turned to look at my dad. Sure enough, he was eating enemy pie. "Mmm, good stuff," he mumbled through a mouthful, and that was all he said. I sat there watching them eat enemy pie for a few seconds. Dad was laughing, Jeremy was happily eating, and neither of them was losing any hair. It seemed safe enough, so I took a tiny taste. Enemy pie was delicious. After dessert, Jeremy rode his bike home, but not before inviting me over to play on his trampoline in the morning. He said he'd teach me how to flip. As for enemy pie, I still don't know how to make it. I still wonder if enemies really do hate it, or if their hair falls out, or their breath turns bad. But I don't know if I'll ever get an answer, because I just lost my best enemy.
Hey, Fairview families. My favorite subject in school had to be physical education. I loved running around and playing with my friends during the school day. My favorite picture book as a kid was Goodnight Gorilla. I just loved how the gorilla let all those animals out of the zoo and thought it was a joke. And I picked my favorite mystery animal because I used to live in a place called Maui, Hawaii, and it had a ton of dolphins. And we would see them almost daily. So look forward to reading the book to you. Take care. Giraffes can't dance. Gerald was a tall giraffe whose neck was long and slim, but his knees were awfully crooked and his legs were rather thin. He was very good at standing still and munching shoots off trees, but when he tried to run, he buckled at the knees. Now, every year in Africa, they hold the jungle dance, where every single animal turns up to skip and prance. And this year, when the day arrived, poor Gerald felt so sad because when it came to dancing, he was really very bad. The warthogs started waltzing, the rhinos rocked and rolled, the lions danced the tango that was elegant and bold. The chimps did the cha-cha-cha with a very Latin feel, then 8 baboons teamed up for a splendid Scottish reel. Gerald swallowed bravely as he walked toward the floor, but the lions saw him coming, and they soon began to roar. "Hey, look at clumsy Gerald," the animals all sneered. "Giraffes can't dance, you silly fool. Oh, Gerald, you're so weird." Gerald simply froze up. He was rooted to the spot. "They're right," he thought. "I'm useless. Oh, I feel like such a clod." So he crept off from the dance floor, and he started walking home. He'd never felt so sad before, so sad and so alone. Then he found a little clearing, and he looked up at the sky. "The moon can be so beautiful," he whispered with a sigh. "Excuse me," coughed the cricket, who had seen Gerald earlier on, "but sometimes when you're different, you just need a different song. Listen to the swaying grass and listen to the trees. To me, the sweetest music is the branches in the breeze. So imagine that the lovely moon is playing just for you. Everything makes music if you really want it to." With that, the cricket smiled and picked up his violin. Then Gerald felt his body do the most amazing thing. He threw his legs out sideways, and he swung them everywhere. Then he did a backwards somersault and leapt up in the air. Gerald felt so wonderful, his mouth was open wide. "I'm dancing, yes, I'm dancing. I am dancing," Gerald cried. Then one by one, each animal who'd been there at the dance arrived while Gerald boogied on and watched him quite entranced. They shouted, "It's a miracle. We must be in a dream. Gerald's the best dancer that we've ever seen." "How did you learn to dance like that? Please, Gerald, tell us how." Gerald simply twirled around and finished with a bow. Then he raised his head and looked up at the moon and stars above. "We all can dance," he said, "when we find the music that we love." The end.
You have until Thursday to cast your vote. On Friday, we will unmask the readers with the least amount of votes. The rest will move on to the next round.